You want to get to JP? We got some basil.
Yeah, JP's reeling in some whales. He's been out there fishing. He's been fishing.
JP Morosi with us, leading the league in information.
You notice how calm he's been since the football playoffs haven't started yet, and Michigan's not playing.
He'll get wound up.
He's been calm.
Lions looked pretty good yesterday.
How about the Lions? That's the biggest turnaround in all of sports, isn't it?
Good morning, guys. Thank you for the kind words on both of our local football teams. Yes, it's rare that I could mention the Lions off the top of a Monday morning show with a great deal of excitement, but big win yesterday over Minnesota, and there is at least a faint hope of the playoffs.
How about that?
Here in the great state of Michigan.
Hey, let's get you to some baseball here.
Wow.
We'll start in New York. It strikes me that for the New York Mets, in letting Jacob deGrom sign that very lucrative deal to jump ship and go to Arlington, they were able to earmark that money and turn it into Justin Verlander, Jose Quintana, and Kodai Senga, the Japanese import who had opportunities with other clubs as well. Why, at the end of the day, beside the $75 million, did Senga choose the Mets?
Well, it was certainly a huge acquisition for the Mets. I think it was a fair price. I actually heard from another club executive, a rival club, who after this deal was announced or reported, said that's a very fair price on the years and the dollars for Kodai Senga. Of course, he can opt out after the third year of the deal. And in so many ways, guys, this is an ideal spot for Kodai Senga. He's joining a rotation alongside, as you mentioned, some luminaries, some excellent starting pitchers. He doesn't have to be the ace. He could potentially be, as you see it there on the screen, the number 3 starter. And when you discuss where this rotation is, if you think about when the offseason began, they had DeGrom, Bassett, Taijuan Walker. Those 3 out, the new 3 in. Verlander, Senga, Quintana. You could argue that it's a stronger 3 now. There may be some that prefer the previous 3, but the reality is this rotation is about as good now as it was when this season ended. Of course, it didn't end the way the Mets hoped or wanted to, but with Verlander and his durability, at this moment in time, for the next couple years at least, you may say that you'd prefer Verlander to DeGrom, and then Senga, you hope, is at least as reliable as Bassett was. And I think based on what the industry believes, people I've spoken with, that's a pretty good, not even a gamble, it's a pretty good plan on the part of the Mets.
Yeah, JP, it was interesting. Part of the conversation was, are the Mets any better after they signed Nimmo and brought in Verlander? Are you better than you were last year? And there was an argument there. I think this tips the scales, the moves that they made right here with Senga just takes it to the next level for me. I think they're a better club right now.
I agree, Harold. And remember, the key thing with Senga is that forkball. It's a unique pitch. We don't see it as often in Major League Baseball. It's much more common in the Japanese style of pitching. And so Senga's going to utilize his key out pitch against a lot of hitters who don't often see it. So I think especially early on this coming season, he's going to be an especially dynamic pitcher that people are not familiar with, not comfortable in the at-bat against him, because he does have a lively fastball to go along with that forkball. And I think to bring it back to the key reason why the Mets have become so strong, it's ownership. Steve Cohen has indicated that he is willing to pay the penalties, to pay the price, to put the very best team on the field that he can, and that's the reason why Kodai Senga is a Met this morning.
What did Tom Selleck call that pitch? Mr. Baseball? What was
Mr. Baseball? I don't know. I don't really remember Mr. Baseball.
You don't remember? You didn't watch that movie?
I saw it, but it didn't make an impact on me. Not one of my favorite baseball movies.
Okay, we'll send it out
No
to
offense,
our viewers.
Tom.
Let us know.
Hey, so, the dude's going to be 30 years old next month, 11 years in Japan, over 1,300 professional innings. And that pays no attention to the countless amateur innings that he racked up in Japan. And we know all the stories about pitchers in Japan pitching both ends of doubleheaders and these acts of heroism that have a cumulative effect on an elbow and a shoulder. 5 years, look, the Mets are taking a little bit of a risk here. But as you point out, worth the freight for Steve Cohen because he wants to win right now. Let's go to another deal that we learned of that is for fewer guaranteed years. And that also includes an opt-out. 2 years for Sean Manaea to go back to the Bay Area and join the Giants.
I like this deal.
How in a 2-year deal Are we building in opt-outs? I don't get it. Here's
Yeah,
a tweet from John Heyman. This is a part of a trend that started not long ago, JP. 2 years, but with an opt-out.
Matty, you're spot on. And a couple things about this deal. Number one, we know the Giants have been very active in the free agent market overall. They have not been successful in actually landing the players. We know they were pursuing Brandon Nimmo, of course, Aaron Judge first and foremost. This cannot be the Giants' last signing of the offseason because of what we've talked about regarding their needs. They have to find a way to get one more major position player, perhaps Carlos Correa. More on him as the show goes along. But, Matt, your point on the opt-out, of course, Sean Manaea, a Scott Boras client. Scott, in many ways, has pioneered this approach with the opt-out. What it's done in general, I'll make this broad point. We were at the winter meetings just last week. The number of players who get the opt-out and then activate it has a function of flooding the market with a lot of free agents on a continual basis, which does a couple things. It sort of marginalizes a bit the major league average player, if you will, and pushes them further down the priority list, whereas in some years you might have had a mid-tier starter who got paid like an ace because simply there was not that much supply out there. Now, on an annual basis, the supply is always there. And I think that is having a really meaningful effect on the way the industry works overall. The second piece of it is the trade market operates on a much slower basis. I think certainly this month, we're about halfway through December. I suspect on this show, on a daily basis, we'll have a continual procession of signings. And then once the calendar flips after Christmas time, January is going to be the month of trades when all the free agent options are largely off the board. I think it's really created almost a two-tier, two-step offseason hot stove process because, to your point, Matt, there's a continual influx of pitchers and position players who are able to opt out of their deals.
All right, well, as we're talking about left-handed starters finding homes, the big one that's out there still is Carlos Rodon. And I would say, as a broad statement, once again, that the market couldn't have worked out any better for Carlos Rodon to be the big fish standing after these lucrative deals have been signed by marquee names. The price for Rodon seems to be going up with every one of these smaller signings. The Giants, now that they've inked Manaea, are they still in here to perhaps bring him back? I'm not sure if they were ever in. And is there a leader in the clubhouse for his services?
Matt, he certainly is the best pitcher available, certainly after the Kodai Senga signing. Rodon, it's believed that when you consider where Jacob deGrom's deal went, 5 years, that Rodon is expected to get more than 5 years. And he's younger. He threw 100 more innings than deGrom did in 2022. So there's a lot of interest in him because of his relative durability in comparison to Jacob deGrom. Now, there was a report from John Heyman over the weekend about the Cardinals being potentially the mystery team in there on Carlos Rodon. What I'm hearing on the Cardinals is that perhaps they're not as interested as other clubs, but they do want to add a starting pitcher. So the Giants we have to watch. I would say also the Dodgers, who have been somewhat quiet this offseason in terms of the major spending. So stay tuned there on the Dodgers. I would even look east as well and wonder, what about the Red Sox? I realize if they were going to spend big on someone, they probably should have spent big on their own guy in Xander Bogaerts. But you look at their rotation at the moment, the Red Sox still have some starting pitching needs as well. So I expect Rodon to do exceptionally well. And he could still potentially stay. Pardon me. He'll certainly be. Well, he already opted out here, and I would expect that Rodon will likely get an opt-out in this next deal as well. And that's probably, Harold, to your point, one of the reasons why it's so complicated. What the opt-out does is it creates an uneven amount of risk. Usually there's a certain amount of risk that both teams get. Obviously, whenever a player signs, hey, you're now locked into a particular team at a particular rate of pay. And now there's a backstop on that for the player's perspective to where if the player overperforms what the contract says, they're on the open market and a greater share of the risk belongs to the team. It really does, I think, create an imbalance in what the value of each free agent contract is.
These guys opt out, and you got to wave goodbye.
Sayonara.
They say sayonara if they opt out because it's in the contract.